Hello everyone, this video will talk to you about Tunisia, which is an example we use as part of the changing economic world topic. We use this as an example then of how the growth of tourism in an LIC or NEE is helping to reduce the development gap. So as with all case studies, we want to think about the location, and there's a lovely little map here in the middle of the screen that you can see. Okay, this shows you Tunisia's location then. And is useful just to sort of frame some of the discussions that we're going to have in a minute. So the key facts and the things to be aware of when thinking about Tunisia as an example here are the points that you can see on the screen, and I've sort of listed my top 3 ideas here. So the first thing I think to consider is that in 2013 tourism brought 6.2 million people to Tunisia, and in a minute we're going to think about why that's happened, but also how and what impact that's had on the development gap. Secondly, the GNI per capita then of $4,320 in 2014. So again, going to consider what impact that's having on development. And finally then, this massive increase that we're seeing in life expectancy. Now some might say, well, this is showing us social development. And again, we want to sort of think about the reasons that are contributing to this and why this is happening. So I've talked already, haven't I, about a lot of why this is happening and why Tunisia might be a popular tourist destination if we sort of link this back to the spec. So we can sort of bullet point a few reasons as to why this sort of change or why this is happening. So the first thing that makes Tunisia very, very popular amongst tourists is the climate. If you're going to go on holiday somewhere, it's highly likely that you want somewhere with a nice warm climate. And Tunisia offers that. It's got what we call a Mediterranean climate. So nice hot summers, mild winters, temperatures are about 40 degrees on coastal cities. So quite popular with tourists, number one, because of its weather. Secondly, is the fact that it's close to Europe. Now we might be thinking, well, why is that important? Well, short journey times for people, easily accessible, particularly with sort of the French. It used to be a French colony, so those speaking French there makes it very, very popular for French-speaking tourists. For people that are sort of particularly concerned with their geography, it's got 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So things like the ancient remains of the city, for example. So UNESCO Heritage Sites draw in lots of tourists. Okay, those are things that are specific to the place. You can only see them there. So therefore, it's almost like a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Again, sticking with those people that love geography, maybe as much as me, they would also say, well, it's got really diverse physical landscapes. So you can go to the coast and the next day you could go to the mountains or the deserts. So again, really popular in terms of wanting to do sightseeing and seeing a wide range of things. For those people that love their movies, Star Wars was also shot in parts of the desert. So that would attract fans of the film. And I suppose the final thing here to say is that Tunisia sort of has a lot of cheap package holidays. Okay, they've been available since they were introduced in about the 1960s. So companies like Thomas Cook, who unfortunately aren't with us anymore, turned it into a really popular tourist destination. Okay, so these 5 points here that you can see on the screen are really sort of the big reasons why A, tourism has increased here, but B, some may be helping us to understand sort of how it's helped to reduce this development gap. Now, when I'm talking about the development gap here, I'm talking about the gap between the world's richest and the world's poorest. So if we think about a little bit of the history of Tunisia, we know it was an LIC before the 1970s. Okay, and that links back to the spec, doesn't it? And we were concerned about an LIC or an NEE. So if it was an LIC then before the 1970s, tourism here, we could argue, has helped to sort of diversify the country's economy. So it's not just based on agriculture or farming anymore. We're now sort of seeing the emergence of new industries, and tourism sort of helped to bring that back a little bit. And might we say, well, why has that happened then? Well, incomes have quadrupled, so they've got 4 times bigger since 1970. And again, we can link that back to tourism as well, and those new jobs there have helped to generate some of that new income. So if you've got more money, you're likely to be able to spend that on things like better food. You're likely to sort of increase your health. You'll have more opportunities to look after yourself. So therefore, we would get an increased life expectancy as well. So if we've talked about sort of diet and healthcare, The only thing really sort of left to say with that one is that things like education as well is going to be massively benefited. So literacy rates as well have gone up. Okay, so literacy rates are sort of thing, basic skills that sometimes we take for granted. So the literacy rate here has increased from 66% right the way to 79%. Okay, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually quite significant. We've now got more families that can afford to send their children to school and even to university. So again, we're seeing a whole host of benefits here. We could say, well, what's more than that now is that tourism is accounting for 8% of the GDP. Yeah, that's quite a significant chunk again, isn't it? So we could sort of almost back up saying, well, yeah, some of these changes are definitely happening and we can prove that it's tourism because look how much of the GDP or the income for the country is generated through that. Again, with this, we could say, well, exposure to other cultures and connections, so through tourists coming to Tunisia, we could say that's, well, to some extent influenced their attitudes, particularly towards girls. So school now is compulsory for females, so women are more educated. They've got a higher chance of going to university too. Okay, so again, that's really going to benefit the development of the country as a whole, isn't it? If everybody's now having access to those opportunities. The one big drawback here, and the one thing to consider, however, then, is sort of the threat that some sort of terrorist activities are taking there. Okay, so we did have some attacks in 2015, and that sort of hindered the progress at reducing the development gap. And some people might say, well, that actually widened it as money's been spent on arms and not really sort of pumped back into the country. Okay, but that's something to sort of consider on reflection and on balance. Okay, so when you're likely to see Tunisia in the exam is probably going to be in a 6 marker. That's not to say you won't get it in a 9 marker, but sort of weighing up these points here, they might well ask you on about how it's helped to reduce the development gap. Okay, to what you'd want to say there as well, here's why and here's how it's happened. So I hope you found this video helpful, and as ever, if you've got questions, feel free to go and ask your geography teacher.